Under a sky streaked with copper and bruised lavender, Lainey Marshall paused at the edge of the trail, her fingers steadying the leash in her gloved hand. At 68, this retired university professor had walked these sea cliff paths for years, but tonight's hush carried a different weight. Behind her sweater and pressed close to her heart rested Olivia's dog tags warmed by memory and the promise of protection. Orion, her war-trained German shepherd, shifted beside her, muscles coiled and senses alert. The opening frame teased viewers with the promise of a shocking confrontation, urging them to subscribe and share where they were watching from, as if their location could somehow tip the balance of what was to come. Before we continue, we'd really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us get closer to 1,000 subscribers. It means the world to us. Thank you so much. The breeze carried the salt and whisper of the Pacific, brushing Lainey's face like a long-lost caress, igniting memories of Olivia's gentle voice. The right ones follow your soul. She glanced over her shoulder at the empty expanse of pavement, noting how the fading light seemed more like a warning than peace. Every evening until 3 weeks ago, her walk had been a ritual of solace. Now the stillness pressed in, selective and suffocating. As Orion's ears pricked forward, Lainey felt that same chill in her spine, a sense that they were not alone. Without sirens or strobing lights, a parked cruiser had begun appearing at the corner, blending into twilight, but claiming dominion over her path. Tonight, that silent patrol felt less like routine and more like a calculated game of cat and mouse. Lainey drew in a steady breath, the calm before a storm. She had learned long ago that in America, peace was a privilege, never a guarantee. And as she clipped Orion's leash, she knew this walk would be unlike any other, because tonight they were not the only ones watching. Under the pall of a fading sunset, memories of Olivia surged through Lainey's mind like tidal waves. Olivia, her beloved wife and a decorated veteran, had received the customary folded flag in brief commendation. But in her final act of love, she entrusted Lainey with something far more profound: Orion, the battle-hardened German shepherd she'd trained, and a steadfast belief that those who follow their heart will never lose their way. Together, Lainey and Orion tread the narrow coastal trail, where eucalyptus boughs bowed to the wind and wildflowers murmured secrets in the dusk. Yet as they advanced, the familiar salt tang of the Pacific carried an undercurrent of acidity, an unsettling tension that had not been there before. 3 weeks ago, without warning, black and white cruiser appeared at the curve engine, idling in silence, its headlights off as if waiting for permission to emerge. It didn't patrol, it possessed. Inside, Sergeant Victor Cole sat rigid behind the wheel, his grin manufactured, his boots polished to an unsettling sheen. At his side, Officer Daniel Price maintained a low chuckle that felt more like a threat, while wide-eyed rookie Justin Parker clutched his baton as though it were a lifeline. They lurked in shadowed corners, their presence an unspoken challenge, and Lainey felt their eyes on her every step. What had once been a sanctuary for reflection had become a gauntlet of scrutiny. Olivia's parting words echoed in her chest. "You carry more than memories. You carry purpose." Still, Lainey could not shake the chill creeping along her spine. Orion, ever attuned, mirrored her unease with a slight stiffening of his posture. The trail stretched before them, a ribbon of gravel against the sea, but tonight it felt like the edge of a precipice. And as Lainey glanced back at the cruiser's dark silhouette, she understood that this was no random surveillance. It was a calculated test of her resolve, and neither she nor Orion could afford to falter. Despite feeling the cruiser's gaze, Lainey pressed on each step, a quiet act of defiance. She had spent decades swallowing her pride, smiling when asked if her PhD was real, apologizing for a clerk's mistake, lowering her voice in church when Olivia's name surfaced. But after that final salute at her wife's grave, she vowed never to be silenced again. Orion's sudden sharp bark jolted her back to the present. The patrol car had reappeared, engine idling like a predator, ready to pounce, its lights cruelly extinguished. It sat 2 blocks away, as if staking claim to the trail. Lainey drew a steadying breath, recalling Olivia's words, "Walk like they can't erase you." She squared her shoulders and planted her feet, letting each deliberate stride echo against the pavement. This was no longer a simple evening ritual. It was rebellion. The salt breeze, that once soothed, now carried a sting of indignation. Lainey felt it in her chest, a slow-burning fury forged by years of complacent obedience. The world had taught her to be small, polite, grateful. Tonight she refused every lesson. Orion matched her pace, powerful muscles rippling beneath his coat eyes, scanning the shadows. He wasn't just following commands, he was following her soul. As she approached the bend where the eucalyptus bowers gave way to street lamps, Lainey sensed the stillness tighten around her like a noose. The cruiser remained motionless, dark and watchful. In that hovering quiet, she could almost hear the unspoken challenge: walk away or face the consequences. Yet she did not waver. Her footsteps rang out, not long but proud, each one a reaffirmation that she belonged here. Every fiber of her being crackled with determination. The injustice of a lifetime swelled in her veins, fueling her resolve. They thought they could intimidate a retired professor, a woman in her late 60s, into submission. But as Orion's steady gait mirrored hers, Lainey knew this path was hers to reclaim, and she would not be erased. As Lainey rounded the bend where eucalyptus boughs surrendered to the glow of street lamps, fate intervened 3 blocks away. A teenage boy, Tyler Price, tested a new gimbal on his drone, aiming only to capture the sunset's last embers. But machines record truth without prejudice. The drone descended imperceptibly, its lens slicing through twilight air to reveal the parked cruiser tailing Lainey and Orion. Through the aviator shades, Sergeant Victor Cole's eyes flickered with calculated intent. Beside him, Officer Daniel Price tapped his baton against the dash in a silent warning. Unaware, Lainey continued, each footfall echoing like a heartbeat against the gravel. Orion's ears twitched. The dog sensed the shift before the human mind could register it. Down below, Tyler adjusted altitude, drawn by the tension he hadn't anticipated. His controller hummed quietly, the only witness to that gaze, the oppressive surveillance Victor and Price believed invisible. In that suspended moment, the drone captured not just a woman and her dog, but a collision of power and defiance, etching it forever into pixels that no badge could erase. The patrol car eased forward until it blocked the narrow trail engine rumbling softly in the night. Its headlights stayed off the darkness, cloaking its intent. Victor Cole stepped out first, smoothing the crease in his uniform with a forced smile. "Lovely night for a stroll, isn't it?" he drawled, voice dripping with feigned concern. Behind him, Daniel Price's lips curled into a smirk as he reached out to brush Lainey's dog tags with the tip of his finger, an unspoken dare. Justin Parker remained seated in the back, shoulders hunched, eyes darting between his partners and the woman who refused to yield. Orion's low growl rolled across the gravel, a warning thunderclap in miniature. He planted himself squarely between Lainey and the 3 officers, muscles rippling under his coat. Lainey's grip on the leash tightened. She didn't flinch. "Not yet," she murmured, voice steady as steel. Above them, the drone shuddered, its gimbal whirring as it recorded every heartbeat of tension. Victor's smile flickered, then vanished. "Back off," he ordered, glancing skyward. Daniel lunged to snatch at the tags, but Orion responded in a heartbeat, leaning forward. Teeth bared the air, trembling around him. In that flash, the drone's red recording light blinked on, illuminating the stunned faces of the officers as they realized their performance had been captured for all the world to see. By dawn, the raw footage of Lainey's standoff had exploded across social media. 16-year-old Tyler Price uploaded the unedited clip before heading to school, and by mid-morning it had racked up over 40,000 shares. Aurora Heights awoke to its own reflection, one black woman and her war dog standing firm against 3 uniformed officers. Comments flooded in, some hailed Lainey as a hero, others sneered that she provoked conflict by walking a massive dog after dark. Overnight, someone spray-painted "liar" across her mailbox in dripping red letters. The next morning, a single bouquet of white lilies lay on her doorstep. No card, no apology, just quiet defiance. In the aisles of the local co-op, Mr. Halverson, who once greeted Lainey with a warm hug, now skirted her gaze as though afraid of contagion. Neighbors who used to wave at the Marshall residence crossed the street to avoid eye contact. Even at the veterans' brunch Olivia had helped found, only retired Marine Susan Ramirez dared offer a silent nod and pour orange juice without comment. Everywhere else, a tense hush settled. Speaking up felt dangerous. Staying silent felt complicit, and neutrality no longer existed. The town's polished veneer cracked under the weight of exposure. Local news vans lined the boulevard, anchors oozed concern from their live shots, and heated debates erupted on community forums. Some demanded prosecution of the officers, others decried anti-police propaganda. But through it all, one truth stood unwavering. A single drone's lens had pierced the shield of silence, and Aurora Heights could not unsee what it had seen. Lainey Marshall's walk, once private and peaceful, had become a mirror held up to the town's soul, and that reflection would not be ignored. Late that night, Laney's phone buzzed beside her bed. The display read Deputy Angela Reed. At 42, Angela was one of the rare black women in Aurora Heights' sheriff's office, a quiet force of integrity. Laney. Angela began, her voice low and measured. I've watched the footage on repeat. This isn't an isolated incident. Victor Cole's unit has a documented pattern of stops and intimidation across 3 districts, complaints that vanished for lack of evidence. Laney listened as Angela described years of hushed reports, black residents pulled over without cause, interior reviews that swallowed every grievance. But your video, and Angela said, it's the crack in the dam. The raw, unedited drone footage had shattered the department's ability to ignore injustice. Angela paused. I want you to testify before the Internal Affairs Commission and the District Attorney's Office. 8A Layla Carson will lead the case. Laney's throat tightened. Stepping into the spotlight meant endless scrutiny, interrogation, public debates, her life picked apart like evidence. Yet beneath her hesitation, Olivia's words surfaced. Whatever happens, do it standing. After a heartbeat, Laney exhaled. All right, she replied, resolve sharpening in her tone. I'll do it. Thank you, Angela said, relief threading her voice. This town needs your voice. As the call ended, Laney stared at the phone in her hand, knowing there was no turning back. Tomorrow she would walk into that hearing not as a victim, but as a witness. Late into the night, Laney's home bore the scars of backlash, shattered glass from a rock wrapped in yesterday's news warning, keep your mouth shut, and her mailbox dented beyond repair. Inside the living room was a fortress of paperwork, drone footage, printouts piled high, witness statements, meticulously organized complaint forms, and Angela's text messages spread across the coffee table like battle plans. Laney rehearsed her testimony again and again, voice steady but heart pounding, each question anticipated and answered aloud. Orion never left her side, his massive presence a calming anchor amid her mounting anxiety. She ate little and slept less, haunted by the echo of Olivia's final promise. Stand tall no matter the cost. As dawn approached, she perched in Olivia's well-worn leather chair, fingertips tracing the cold metal of the dog tags at her throat. In that quiet, she felt both fear and fierce resolve intertwined, fear of the scrutiny awaiting her, resolve born of a lifetime spent bending her voice for others. Yet she was no longer alone. With Orion's steady breathing at her feet and Angela's unwavering support on the line, Laney whispered to herself, I will see this through. The final night before the hearing was not peaceful, but it was purposeful, every sleepless hour, forging her courage for the battlefield ahead. On the morning of the hearing, Laney stepped into the courthouse clad in her navy blazer, Olivia's dog tags resting visibly against her chest like forged armor. Her stride was calm, deliberate, every step measured and unyielding as she entered the hushed courtroom. The only evidence presented was the raw drone footage, 3 officers circling her, leaning in to touch her dog tags, and the instant Orion positioned himself between her and threat. No voiceover, no soundtrack, just unvarnished truth. When called to the stand, Laney's voice rang clear and steady. She recounted the first sighting of the cruiser, the moment she felt erased, as they stalked her, Orion's low growl that shattered their silent intimidation, and the surge of anger when one officer lunged for her tags. Each detail she delivered with precision, her words punctuated by unblinking eye contact with the jury. The defense sought to twist the narrative, suggesting her choice of a large dog was provocative, casting doubt on her memory, implying she had antagonized the officers. But the footage spoke louder than their questions. Faces around the table shifted as jurors watched the grainy frames of predatory presence and canine courage. When the judge recessed for deliberation, Laney remained seated, shoulders squared, heart pounding, not in fear, but in quiet triumph. The battleground had shifted. Justice waited behind closed doors, armed with undeniable evidence. When the jury filed back into the courtroom, the hush felt heavier than any thunder. One by one, they returned the verdict, guilty on all counts. Laney Marshall remained motionless as the words echoed off marble walls. She didn't gasp or weep. Instead, she inhaled deeply, as though reclaiming every stolen breath. In that charged silence, justice spoke, and she stood taller. Outside sunlight fractured over the sea cliffs as Laney emerged onto the trail where it all began. Orion padded at her side, unleashed, but never straying far, a steadfast guardian born of loss and loyalty. A small crowd had gathered beyond the courthouse steps, neighbors, strangers, local reporters. When they saw her, applause broke out, tentative at first, then swelling into something raw and genuine. A young woman with tears in her eyes stepped forward, pressing a single yellow rose into Lainey's hand. "You were brave," she whispered, voice quivering. No banners proclaimed victory. There were no brass bands or speeches, just the simple, powerful rhythm of feet on gravel. With the Pacific wind at her back, Lainey closed her eyes and felt the world shift beneath her. The same trail that once held only shadows now bore witness to her resolve. Each footfall was a quiet testament. Dignity is not granted, it is claimed. Around her, Aurora Heights' polished facade cracked, unable to deny what had been laid bare. A single woman and her war dog standing firm against fear. And in that moment, as dusk draped the cliffs in violet light, Lainey Marshall walked on, not as a victim, but as proof that the human spirit cannot be erased. 1 year later, the Aurora Heights Trail still bore the echoes of that fateful confrontation, but now it carried something new: hope. Lainey Marshall, her hair streaked with silver, yet her posture as unwavering as ever, had transformed that solitary walk into a movement. She'd spent the past 12 months speaking at community centers, inviting neighbors to join her evening strolls and reclaim the path together. Orion, now older but no less vigilant, trotted beside her manageable group of supporters, students, veterans, and families of all backgrounds, each finding courage in her example. In the intervening year, internal reforms within the sheriff's office had been enacted: mandatory de-escalation training, transparency measures for all stops, and installation of publicly accessible drone footage archives. ADA Layla Carson's prosecution became a landmark case taught in law schools nationwide, and Deputy Angela Reed rose to lead a newly formed civil rights division. Local leaders often credited Lainey's testimony and Tyler Price's footage as the catalyst. At the site where the cruiser once loomed, a simple wooden plaque now reads, "Dignity requires witnesses." On sunny afternoons, passers-by paused to touch Helen's name engraved at its base. Lainey herself visited the marker regularly, pressing her palm against the wood as if greeting an old friend. She never sought fame, but her quiet resolve rippled outward, inspiring others to stand firm in small acts of defiance, speaking up, extending a hand, refusing to look away. And every evening when the sky bled those same copper and lavender hues, Lainey and Orion would set out once more. The path no longer felt like a gauntlet, but a testament that one woman's journey to demand justice could redraw a community's horizon, one deliberate step at a time. This story teaches us that courage does not have to roar with aggression. It can emerge from steadfast footsteps and proud eyes. When an ordinary walk becomes a declaration, each of us must ask, is condemning racism through silent but resolute action strong enough? The core message is that we cannot delegate justice to others. Every individual holds the power to shift collective consciousness. Now, dear reader, please share your personal perspective on this journey. What surprised you most, and how would you inspire your community? At the same time, predict when racism will truly end: 2030, 2050, or even later. Leave a comment, and together let us envision a future free of divisive prejudice, where every step we take fills the spaces of understanding and empathy.